shipping, like so many different things. And so when I started working at my company, it was very different from what I expected, because what I studied in school was, okay, I'm going to probably end up working in a company where maybe they make polymer products, right? Plastics products. Either I'm going to be making like plastic bottles, or I'm going to be making like, anything plastic based. I never in my wildest dream expected to be working in life sciences. I hated biology. So I never ever took biology in school. So it's such an interesting thing to see that now I'm working in a space that's heavily bio and chemistry. I'm also a STEM diversity advocate, and this stems from my journey in, engineering. When I was the journey to get to my engineering degree, I realized I was one of I would say three women in almost all my classes in school. And so when I came out of college and I started, working in the industry, I realized the statistics was still the same, right? And I realized that I needed more people who look like me. I needed to create space because now I'm that person that can give back to the person in college, the young Black girl in college who's looking for someone to look up to. I'm that person now. So I wanted to, use my social media platform to help advocate, to create space for more Black women in STEM. And in doing that, I've been able to, start a few podcasts. Like she mentioned, I do a podcast called Plastics and Beyond, which mainly focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the plastics industry. So plastics is not a very large field. So imagine engineering or STEM as a whole. Women are minority, Black women are even more minority. Now add plastics engineering into it. It's like I'm like at the very, very bottom. So, I'm in doing this, I'm trying to, one, create um, let people know of plastics engineering, know that it's a field that exists, but also to let people know that I'm a Black woman in STEM who is also in the plastics field, who knows a lot about, what it means like to be a double or triple minority in this space. And I also recently started my podcast, Dear Women in STEM podcast, which the goal of that podcast is to create a safe space for women in STEM. There's so many things, so many questions that I had when I was a college student, when even as a professional. And I feel like if you don't really have the community, where do you go to get these questions answered? Like you're graduating from school, should you go ahead and, pursue your master's or PhD, or should you go straight away to work? Having these transparent, candid conversations on my podcast is to try and create that space that people may not necessarily have in their individual lives, um, to help them, find their people and to help them answer questions that they may have. So I kind of touched on this a little, but I graduated from high school in Ghana, and then I came immediately to college in Florida to pursue chemical engineering. On that journey, I failed to the point of almost being kicked out of college. Luckily for me, and God came through. I'm a woman of faith. God intervened and saw it fit for me to still be on this journey. So I was able to transfer to Massachusetts, where I went to a community college. A community college is like a 2-year college where you end up getting your associate's in science degree. And so I was able to succeed at the community college, where I even became like a science tutor to my peers. From there, I went ahead to transition to the University of Massachusetts in Lowell, where I finally got my plastics degree. When I graduated with my degree, I then started working full time, and that's where I am now. So, imposter syndrome, it's something that, for me, I mentioned that I failed a number of times in college. So, going into the professional field, I was really struggling, like probably more than, the regular female, because I was coming from a space where maybe I'd taken organic chemistry twice, I had taken calculus twice. So, for me, it's like, okay, was it just because of luck that, allowed me to finally pass those classes? Was it because, the second time I took it, I got an easier professor. That's why. Was it because, like, I had all these questions. So going into the professional space and even starting at a lower position than I should have, it, fed into all these fears and insecurities that I had. And at that time, I didn't know it was imposter syndrome. I just thought, okay, I mean, like, it makes sense to ask myself these questions because, technically, like, I failed this class, I failed that class. Like, it's okay. Like, maybe engineering is not really for you. Maybe, like all this thing happened because of luck, right? But then as time went on, I realized that the more that I spoke to people, the more that I spoke to women, more Black women in STEM, even people, white women in STEM, white men in STEM, everybody experiences it. So I wanted to start by letting you know, if you find yourself experiencing any of these things, just know that we all experience it. It's not specifically targeted to a specific race or a specific group of people. Everyone experiences it. And imposter syndrome is, sorry, let me move this away. I saw this definition on Harvard Business Review, and basically it defines it as, doubting your abilities, right? It's feeling like you're a fraud. And most of the time, it affects people who are high achieving because, you get to a very high position, like maybe, you're placed on the Forbes list and you're like, wait, like, am I really supposed to be there? Because, like, I'm next to people who are making millions and billions, people who have created or developed all these like technology products and people who have set up like major organizations. Like, why am I also on this list? And so these are some of the situations that you find yourself in that would make you question your accolades and even whether you deserve to be where you are. So I was doing a YouTube video one time and I decided to do some research. And I saw that about 75% of female executives experience imposter syndrome. Now, when you're starting out um, your professional career, right? You're coming from college, you're probably coming from, being in school for so long, so you don't really have a lot of experience per se. And so you experiencing imposter syndrome kind of makes sense. It doesn't make it okay, but it makes sense because, you're finding yourself in a room with people who have 20, 30 years experience and you are just coming, you have like what, maybe one internship, 3 months, like you don't compare. And so when I saw this statistic, I was like, wait, female executives, these women have climbed all the way to the very top of their like of the level. Basically, they're like at the very, very top. They are sitting in all these spaces with CEOs and all this. So if these women, like such a huge percentage of these women are experiencing imposter syndrome, then that means there's actually something there that either this imposter syndrome creeps up on you at different points in time. It's no respecter of like whether you're a fresh graduate, whether you're someone with 1,000 years of experience, like everybody experiences it. So this number is to, kind of put your mind at ease a little. If you find yourself experiencing this, know that even more higher achieving women experience this. My favorite first lady. So on one of her tours and in her book, she quoted this. She said, I still have a little imposter syndrome. It doesn't go away. That feeling that you shouldn't take me that seriously. What do I know? I share that with you because we all have doubts in our abilities about our power and what that power is. This is the former First Lady of the United States of America. How is this woman who has met the most powerful people in the world still talking about the fact that she experiences imposter syndrome? Like, I hope at this point you're starting to see the trends, you're starting to, see how this is not just a you thing. This is not just because you're in STEM. This is not just because you're African. This is not just because you're early on in your career. This is not just because of anything. This creeps up on every single person. And it shows up in multiple ways. It can manifest when you get to the very top of your career level, or even when you're starting at the very bottom. So when I heard Michelle Obama talking about this, I was like, wait, I know this doesn't make it okay, but this makes me understand that this is a thing that is there and I'm not going to accept it, but I'm going to find a way to deal with it because it seems like it's not something that just goes away, right? So imposter syndrome affects both men and women, whether you're white, black, Asian, wherever you are, it affects everybody. Wherever you are in your career, whatever field you're in, you experience it, right? And I love this image because you're looking at yourself in the mirror, but you're seeing someone totally different. You're seeing someone who has a mask on, right? But then that's not really who you are, because you looking in the mirror, you don't have a mask on. So why are you seeing yourself with a mask on, right? This is what imposter syndrome does to you. It makes you see something other than what you really are. Now, I want to debunk a few facts and myths about imposter syndrome. A lot of times, when you're experiencing it, you think that imposter syndrome is your fault. Like I mentioned, for me, because I failed classes or I had to take a few classes more than once, um, you know, it's my fault. Like I deserve to experience imposter syndrome. But no, that's not true. Because we've seen that imposter syndrome creeps up on everybody. It happens, there's no pattern, there's no rhyme or reason. It can happen when you get to the very top of your career, or it can happen when you're starting out your career. And also, another fact I would say is that working in an environment that has a huge gender imbalance promotes imposter syndrome. As a woman in STEM, as a Black woman in STEM, let me even add, as an African woman in STEM, I'm always the only one with the only woman, the only African in the room, right? The only Black person in the room. And so when you find yourself in a room like that, it's always very intimidating. And I'll share this with you. I maybe like a year into my professional career, I was, we had weekly meetings for my team, and I was the only woman on the team, and I'm Black as well. So I remember we had, like, the team leader had asked a question, and I had the answer, but I was looking around and nobody was talking. But I felt like, oh, because this question is so hard that nobody has the answer. So who am I to, raise up my hand and say that I have the answer? So I didn't say anything. And then afterwards, I mentioned it to a friend of mine. The next week at the next meeting, I saw that this person basically said what I had told him, and it was the right answer. Right. In that moment, I realized, wow, I'm not going to allow myself to be I'm not going to allow myself to shrink to make anybody comfortable. I'm not going to allow myself to shrink because of any doubts I have in my head. The worst thing that can happen if I speak up in this meeting is them telling me, okay, this is a good answer or this is not a good answer. And if they tell me it's not a good answer, that's going to be the fuel I need to keep pushing and make sure that the next time I give any input, it's closer to the right answer, right? And there are a lot of microaggressions that also contribute to you feeling like an imposter in whatever space you find yourself in. Another myth I would debunk is that imposter syndrome only impacts women. It doesn't. And I had such a light bulb moment at the beginning of this year. I was working directly with my manager, and we were working on a project that we both didn't really have a lot of information on. And so I went to him thinking, okay, he's been working for like 8 years, and I just have about 4 years under my belt. So he surely has the answer to this question. I went to him, and the first thing he said to me was, oh, wow, I don't know what this is. Let's Google it. And he pulled up Google, typed it in, and we both learned this thing on the spot. Like, he didn't have all the answers like I assumed he would, right? In that moment, he also felt very small and felt like, am I an imposter for being in this space, for being somebody's manager when I can't even help give them the answer, right? But then the reality is we're all learning, right? In the professional field, everybody is learning. No one has all the answers. It's a learning process. And so imposter syndrome doesn't only impact you as a woman. And one thing that I think is probably one of the biggest myths is that the most confident people don't experience imposter syndrome. Very confident people tend to mask their imposter syndrome by being so, overconfident or being so loud or being so outspoken. So when you hear them or you see them, you're like, wow, surely this person like never experiences this. But when you pull them aside and you talk to them and you're transparent with them, you realize that indeed these people actually experience it as well, you know? And this is one thing that I fall into this category. This is a fact that women only apply for a promotion or even a job when they meet 100% of the qualifications. If you're a woman on this call, just think about that for a second. Have you seen a job posting where you're like, I meet a good number of these requirements, but I'm missing 3 out of the 10, and you don't apply just because of that? I recently asked my coworker the same question. He's a white man. And I said, if you see this job and you meet like maybe less than half of the requirements, would you apply? He said, oh yeah. And in the interview, and like when I'm granted an interview, I'm going to tell them what I know and what I don't know. And I'm going to let them know that I'm someone that's willing to learn, right? Or I'm going to do the research for the gaps that exist in the job requirements, make sure I educate myself in that. And then when the interview comes, I can speak to it. But as women, we find ourselves, shying away from applying for these jobs. And I really want to encourage you today, push yourself. Like most of the time, the hiring managers are not looking for someone who meets every single one of them. There are certain ones that if you meet, they're like, okay, we can train them on the rest of them. And so always be confident. Don't shy away from opportunities like this and keep pushing yourself. So now let's delve a bit into imposter syndrome in STEM. Um, as Black women in STEM, we experience a lot of discrimination, because there are so many stereotypes about being Black, about being a woman. And so you immediately lowball yourself when, it comes to your career, right? And these create feelings of imposter syndrome. And for me personally, when I started out in my career, I realized that not being able to see people that look like me, made me doubt my abilities and made me, um, not want to even step up or want to even ask for promotions, right? And I'll be completely transparent with you. I'm in a space in my career right now where um there's an opportunity for promotion, and for the first couple of months I struggled to, talk myself into applying or into even putting that bug in my manager's ear, because I was so scared because I didn't have anyone to talk to about it, right? I have my friends, I have my circle, I can bounce things off of them, but in the company itself, I don't have any other woman in there that I can speak to and be like, okay, I see this. What do you think I should do? What do you think is the best way for me to approach this, right? I ended up reaching out to my white male friend, my white male coworker, ex-coworker, who then told me he had experienced something similar, but encouraged me to just start having the conversation with my manager. And now I've made so much progress, and I'm hoping to, finally get that promotion. But not having the right representation around you is a huge roadblock when it comes to imposter syndrome. And also, having role models. And this is why organizations like EFeMS exist, right? Like, trying to create space for women in STEM, trying to, let you see that there are women out there that you may not necessarily see, all over social media, or you may not see in Forbes, or you may not see on, any 100 list or anything like that. But then there are women in STEM that you can look up to. You don't have to be alone in your journey. All right. So I think I touched a bit on these, but the lack of representation for Black women in STEM, can make you feel isolated. I know I strongly experienced that when I was in college. I didn't have anyone to look up to. I didn't have anyone that, could help guide me, even if I had questions, or I felt isolated. And so most of the time, that can also let you miss out on opportunities, right? And, microaggressions exist, people being biased, so many things that like, can influence you and can push you to experience imposter syndrome. I don't really want to spend too much time on this one. Yeah, and I think as Black women in STEM as well, there's so much pressure to excel, right? And I think even being African as well, There's so much pressure coming from, your family, or there's so much pressure that you put on yourself to, excel and to, get to the very top of your career, right? And just to be able to um, show the world or show your community that I've made it, right? And I found myself putting a lot of pressure on myself at a point because I realized that I started putting myself on social media, and so now every little thing that I do, I need to be the very best at it, right? But I had to pull myself back and say, you got into this to be transparent and to show young women out there what it really is like being a Black woman in STEM. Yes, you're going to do your best to be the very best, but you're also not going to always, be at the top of everything that you do, right? And so relieving myself of that pressure really helped me, right? And I think there's a cycle of imposter syndrome where, every single time that you make a mistake or every single time something doesn't work, it brings back the feeling. Like for me, for example, I've done so much work to overcome my fears and my doubts based on what my engineering journey has been like. And I find myself always falling back into it when things don't work out. It's like, oh, you were able to write it out for maybe 2 years, but then, the real thing is showing now, right? You're really not meant to be in this space. And so I encourage you to not allow yourself to fall back into these cycles that keep pulling you back into imposter syndrome. Now, some ways to overcome imposter syndrome, I would say develop a growth mindset, right? Allow yourself to continually keep growing in your field, in whatever space you find yourself in. Celebrate your achievements. That's something that I constantly do. Anytime I find myself experiencing this, especially in the workplace, I always look back at my degree, right? I'm like, you earned this. They don't just give these certificates out for free. You worked hard to get to this point. I don't have no connections in the university to say, oh, please give me this degree for free. No, I worked hard for it. So recognizing my achievements, recognizing the fact that even when it comes to speaking, initially I was very intimidated by it because I was like, I didn't go to school for this. I just started doing this on a whim. And I feel like this is something that God has called me to, but I'm always questioning myself. I'm always asking myself, like, why am I doing this? Or before every presentation, I'm always like, can I really do this? Like, am I as eloquent as I should be? Am I as confident as I should be? Right. But then I think back, I'm like, people keep reaching out to you because you have something to give, because you have an achievement. You've achieved so much that people value you enough and what you have to share enough. And so those are some of the things that help me combat imposter syndrome. I also lean heavily on my network. I know I've had certain conversations with Anna before in the past about, just being transparent about being Black in STEM, being women of faith in STEM, and, all the things that come with it. And so having like a strong network of women or people around you also really helps you as well. Now I'm going to run through the last few so we have time for questions. Um, we all know Maya Angelou, and I saw this quote. She said, I have written 11 books, but each time I think, oh, they're going to find me out now. I've run a game on everyone, and they're going to find me out. This woman is so accomplished. I would not in my wildest dreams expect her to ever feel this way. But this is the reality. Um, Imposter syndrome can affect your mental health. It can affect you progressing in your career, which I think I touched on. And overall, it can affect your well-being, right? You start becoming so stressed out about things, you panic, you start experiencing anxiety, and all these things impact you. And looking at this image, I find it so interesting because, it says what I know, and it's that small circle in the center. And then what I think others know is like this really big circle. But in reality, you know as much as everyone, right? And I think this is something that we need to, like, if you don't walk away with anything from this talk today, walk away with just this diagram. Know that everybody knows the same amount as you do, or you even know more than people. But don't ever allow yourself to think that what other people know is way more than what you know. So, in overcoming imposter syndrome, I would say build resilience. For me, I feel like my journey in STEM has really helped me build a lot of resilience. And so, constantly encouraging myself, constantly reminding myself of why and how I'm in this space, constantly trying to, have a positive mindset about this also really helps me overcome imposter syndrome. Being around supportive environments, and that can also be your network of people. Mentorship, having a mentor um, is something that I highly encourage everyone to have because, when you experience imposter syndrome, most often your mentor can help guide you and give you tips based on their own experiences. And I think that is so fundamental. And do away with negative self talk. That's something I'm saying to myself even now. Talking down on yourself always never like it never helps you with your imposter syndrome. And so make sure to always pour into yourself, speak positive things into yourself, always encourage yourself. Some of the things we say to ourselves, we would never ever say to anybody else. So I want to encourage us to start speaking positive things into our lives, speak positive things into our situations, and that can help you overcome imposter syndrome wherever you find yourself there. And I want to leave you with this. Overcoming imposter syndrome is an ongoing process, right? Everybody experiences it at different points in their life. You just need to find and arm yourself with the right tools to be able to tackle or deal with them when the time comes. But just know you're not alone on your journey. We're all here with you. Everybody in the world experiences imposter syndrome. And so don't feel like it's just you. Now, before I wrap up, I want to ask you these questions, and you don't have to unmute yourself to answer, but I want you to answer these questions internally. Do you downplay your own expertise, even in areas where you are genuinely more skilled than others? Do you feel like you will inevitably be found out as a phony, as a fake? Do you attribute your success to luck or outside factors? I would say sometimes my answers to these questions are all yeses. Other times they're all no's. It varies. But if you find yourself answering yes to any of these questions, you are experiencing imposter syndrome or you have experienced imposter syndrome. And I really hope that you can use these tools that I've been able to share with you to help overcome these feelings or these experiences. Now, finally, one thing that I always use to encourage myself, one of my favorite creators is Issa Rae. And on one of her interviews, she said, I made it here. And she was saying this in regards to imposter syndrome. She said, I made it here. I didn't just get lucky, and no one is going to tell me I don't belong here. This is something you should consistently and continually tell yourself whenever you find yourself in this space. You didn't just get lucky, and no one can tell you you don't belong here. No one is going to tell you you don't belong here. You made it here on your own with the help of God and because you deserve to be there. Thank you.